So on the tails jig, the angle is accomplished by tilting the saw blade, so there's no swivel function like this. So this just goes on here and another piece behind it for support. And then this board, which I cut along with the other one when I made that, goes in here, and the bolt goes through here, through a slot in here, which I have to cut next. So this slot would ideally be cut with a slot mortise screw, but if you don't have one, a drill press will do just fine, because this doesn't have to be super clean or accurate. And I'm just going to clean it up with a chisel. These holes here are for bolting a stop onto the jig with a carriage bolt. And to give the carriage bolt room, I cleared out this area here so that this goes flush against here. And I just did that by drilling a series of holes. And I need to clean up the space in between them just with a chisel. So to give this more stability on here, there's a block that goes behind here. And that block needs to be glued onto the back of here. It should be about centered, but it's not super critical. The important thing is that these two pieces end up exactly flush with each other. So while I'm waiting for that glue to dry, I'm going to work on the stop for this jig for making repeated cuts. And I'm just going to glue on the template here. Well, the glue on this is dry now, so I'm just lining up with the marks that I punched through the template. So I just pre-drilled those holes, so now let's put this together. So this part here now attaches on here just with a carriage bolt and a plastic knob. And that gives us some side-to-side adjustment. So I've just cut this tilt, but how to cut this one? I have to pretty much flip my stock over because my saw doesn't tilt in the other direction, but how to get the alignment and how to get it consistently. And that's where the next trick comes in. So first this cut is made, and then to get consistent widths of tails, I'm adding an alignment pin in here. And then this can be hooked onto here to cut the other side of this tail and get consistent alignment between various tails. So now hooking this on the pin here and checking that I'm up to the mark. And now I just need to put the stop on here just to make sure I'm going to be consistent if I need to recut this. Well, this first test piece on this jig is just a tiny bit loose. I should have been more careful when I cut the shoulder with the bandsaw. So the problem with this pin is if I want to make the initial cuts and I don't have the other set of cuts already, this pin really gets in the way. And rather than try to make this pin removable, because this pin needs to be in there very rigidly, I just cut another copy of the backer board using my same template. And this one doesn't have the pin in it, so I use this one for the first set of cuts. I haven't used this one yet. And then this one for the second set of cuts of the tails. So this carriage bolt with a knob on it and this block here are going to form a repeatable fine adjustment for my second cut tails cuts jigs. And I've drilled this hole just 1/64 under 5/16, and that's just enough for the screw to engage, and I can still turn it in there without having pre-cut a thread, and I've got lots of friction, so this is not going to move on its own. So this adjustable stop goes on here. So the idea of this fine adjustment is I can use this to dial in the exact position so my tails will fit exactly, and then when I take this backer board off and swap out the one that does not have the pin on it to make another set of cuts, once I figure out all my setup, when I put this one back on, I have a positive stop right here so that I can reproduce the exact position that I had before. I want to avoid cutting deeper into my jig than necessary. So to make sure I don't ever push this jig past the center of the blade, I made a little stop that fits in the T-slot right there. And that way, I know I'll never cut out the back of the jig, and the sawdust is always going to get thrown down into the saw. The stop is just a plastic knob with a T-nut on the end of it, and that happens to just fit into the T-slot, and it locks like that. Being able to put the pin on here in 3 different positions adjusts the pivots, and that allows me some flexibility on the front here, because if I put it in the furthest hole from the board, then as the board swings back and forth it travels sideways more, and that makes for a larger space between the pins for wider dovetails. Usually I prefer to put it in the nearest for the narrowest possible slots for the pins. When I used the prototype version of this jig to make this dovetail joint with multiple dovetails on it, I used a bunch of spacers to space over from the fence I'd fixed to the jig to basically space over to the other cuts. But what I found is sometimes as I was making the cuts, these things would fall off and fall into the blade, and so that's not very safe. So I'm making these spacers with a hook on them and also a screw to clamp on here. So to make these spacers, I glued another block on here, and I slightly beveled that down with a belt sander. And now to mount these blocks on here, they need to be mounted on there so that they're a little bit loose, and getting the screw holes all lined up properly is tricky. So what I do is I screw this one in, and that makes sure I'm lined up with the main hole, and these 2 holes in the back are for the small screws. So I'm just going to mark where these go, take this off again, now putting the block back on. I tighten the small number 4 screws not all the way, so that I still have some play on here, and then I tighten this one, and that screw is meant to be tightened on the jig to lock this in place. So that's everything about building the jig, and in my next video I'll cover setting up and using the jig to make a joint.